Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of Lee Ford. Not gonna lie, this case gets me all sorts of angry. So let's go. Sin and Tonic! Today's story is coming to you from a rather harassed Sophie because I went Christmas shopping today, which was beautiful and lovely actually, and really nice. And then ever since I've come home, it feels like stressfulness. So I'm going to decompress while I talk to you, because that's what friends are for. Okay? Thank you. Like I said, this case really, really pissed me off. I mean, every case that I cover is tragic, sad. I've just realised that I have no scarf. I was sure I brought a scarf with me. Naked. Anyhow, so yeah, it does. I don't know why. I can't explain it, but it just really angers me. So I'm going to try and rein that in a bit. But yeah, let's start. I'm going to start with Leslie Ford. Now, Leslie, she grew up in a place called Telford, which is in England, and it's near somewhere called Shropshire. I think they talk like that. I might be wrong, but I think they talk a bit like that. Shropshire, from Shropshire. I think they talk like that. Apologies if that is wrong. She met her husband, her first husband, Michael, on the bus, and it sounds super cute because I think they just got like the same bus together all the time, like home from work. She worked in a care home, and she sounds like she was a very caring, kind person. She worked in a care home, and she would get the bus, and her husband would get the bus, and then one day, before he was her husband, one day they got off the bus together and they walked together, and that is where their romance blossomed. And then they obviously started dating from there, and then they got married. Not long after they got married, in 1983, they would go on to have their first daughter, Sarah Jane. Literally a few months after that, Leslie would fall pregnant with their second daughter. That would be Anne Marie. A year and a half later, they had Stephen Paul. And shortly after that, they had their fourth child, and that was Craig Jonathan, and that was their final child. So they had 4 children. Oh, 2 girls, 2 boys. Nice. But, and this did shock everyone that knew them. People were surprised that they then sadly separated and then went on to divorce, because everybody just said they looked like a really happy couple. They seemed like they loved each other, they had kids, they had a house, they just seemed like they had everything and they were really happy, but you just never know behind closed doors, do you? You just never know. So yeah, people were surprised to find out that they were separating. From what I read and watched, because I watched a documentary as well, which was really interesting and heartbreaking, it seemed like the pressure of having a young family with all of the children quite close together and things like that, just it all mounted, and that was why they separated and then divorced. So yeah, it put a strain on their relationship. I just realised that I've got my hair like a pineapple. Sorry. I don't really, I feel like a bit of a stay. Yeah, does it look like a Christmas tree? I think it's like there's a bit of snow. That's the label. I might cut the label out. Yeah, it's a green scrunchie there. Christmas theme. It was all on purpose. Oh my God, what am I going to wear for my Christmas video? Oh my God. New Year's Eve video is going to have to be like sparkly maybe? Oh no, but I don't know. I'm black. I'm in mourning. I'll be in mourning for this year. But then my Christmas, I've got some Christmas things. I know, just the thing. I'll keep it a secret. I can hear a child screaming. Please, shush, not mine. I digress. In 1990, Leslie would meet somebody else. So she met somebody called Lee Ford. And just as much as her separation from Michael caused people were like, what the hell? So did her pairing with Lee, because he was really different to her. And I know that opposites attract and all that, but okay, we haven't heard the rest of this story yet. But Yeah, so he was described as like a scruffy, I mean, this is just appearances, but we'll go with it. So he was described as scruffy and not, there's no other word, like rough around the edges. And Leslie was described as pretty and well put together. Well put together. Not like me. But yeah, well put together. And also, in terms of their personalities, it doesn't sound like Lee was very liked, and people thought he was just a bit odd and, I guess, unkind. But Leslie, everybody thought that she was kind and caring. That is probably why people were like, what? They didn't get it. They didn't understand this pairing. This is the first point in the story where I get angry and annoyed. I don't think I've done a case before about domestic. Maybe they've touched on that, but this case is like, the domestic abuse and violence in this case. It made me really angry. And people get really angry about things like this, don't they, and have lots of different opinions. But just in general, the whole thing, I was like, So Lee very quickly put a stop to Leslie seeing Michael. But Michael and Leslie had been amicable and friendly and for the sake of their children, and it sounds like it was all quite nice and civilised until Lee came along. Lee then put a stop to Michael and Leslie seeing each other. Okay, I mean, that happens. He then really quickly after that tried to kind of stop Michael having anything to do with the family, with his own children, his own 4 children. And Michael was a dad. He would see the children regularly. It was all normal. And like for a separated family, he wasn't a dad that didn't want anything to do with his kids, but Lee didn't want him to. So that first of all was like, what? Just shut up, and annoying and frustrating. He was determined to have Michael out of their lives. Determined. He was very controlling, and really quickly in the relationship it became apparent. Oh, what's that? It became apparent that he was controlling, jealous, just a lot of bad words, and that this was not going well. He started putting rules in place about when and where and how Michael could see his own kids. I mean, who are you? And he would answer the door and just be like, nope, you can't speak to Leslie. No, you can't see the kids. No, or they're not ready. And he'd like keep them inside for hours and they're not ready yet. They're not ready. And just be a douche. He was just a douche. And you could really feel the frustration of Michael in the interview that I watched. He just wanted to see his kids. And who is this guy? Like, who are you? Go away. Leslie, sadly, all of this, the controlling and all of that, it just escalated, and Leslie would start to ring her brother. She had a brother, and she would ring him, Peter, and tell him that Lee was hitting her. So sometimes she would ring in such a state and be so frightened and so scared that she'd ring her brother and ask him to come and get Lee out of the house. So there were numerous times that Leslie's brother would actually remove Lee from the house, so he'd get him out, and and every time he would just think, oh, is this it? Like, is this going to be the time that she really leaves him? And sadly, as is often the case with domestic violence victims, Leslie would every time she would take Lee back, she'd let him back. So, she'd give him a key and he'd soon be back in. He would convince her that he'd change, things would be different. Despite ongoing violence, like lots of ongoing violence, and this horrible situation, Leslie would marry Lee, and they went on to have 2 children. So that happened. And then in 1995, 5 years later, 5 years after being married to him and having 2 children and living this life, Leslie gets up the courage to leave Lee. She gets up the courage and she moves, and she doesn't tell a soul. And this is really sad for Michael, the 4 children's dad. She doesn't tell him where even. So she just takes her kids and she goes. He hadn't been seeing his children very much, Michael, and it's just really sad, but he hadn't been seeing them very much because Lee was making it harder and harder, and it was nigh on impossible to actually see his own children by this point. And I guess Leslie thought, well, what have I got to lose? And I think at this point it was like she knew that she had to get out. So she didn't tell a single person where she was going, but she moved her and her 6 children to Cornwall. You know, like those moments where it's like, yes. But then, you know, it's a Sin and Tonic case, so it doesn't go well. Lee would track her down. Slimeball. So he contacted Leslie's mother and he posed as a solicitor, and in that way he managed to get Leslie's address and he found where she was. So he tracked her down and he found her, and that's just like, freaking no. Oh my God, how annoying. So he did. Then he said he would change. He was like, he begged her, basically. He begged Leslie to take him back. He was like, we've got children together, we're married, please don't throw this away. And he begged her to have him back. I think the clincher for Leslie, the reason why she did go back or take him back, was that he said that because she'd moved herself to Cornwall with the children and they were living together in Shropshire, you know, a while away. And he said, look, I'll do anything and I'll move here. I'll move here to Cornwall. I'll uproot myself and I'll just drop everything in my life for you and for my family and for the kids, and I'll move here and we can start again. And I think from what I could read between the lines in the documentary that sort of clinched it for her, and she was like, oh, okay, maybe he is going to change. He's going to move here and we're going to start again. Like, new place, yeah, and just start over. So Leslie did take him back, and this would prove to be a fatal mistake. As you can imagine, slowly but surely his old behaviours started to come back. It's almost like he just couldn't help himself. Like, he was so jealous. He was so jealous. So now that they'd moved and they were having a fresh start, he was now jealous of his own children. And also her 4 children, his stepchildren. So he couldn't stand that they would come first. I mean, what is this? Who is he? Stop. He couldn't stand that they would be put first. Come on. So he just got more and more depressed about this situation. Probably because he's trying to hold in his natural way, which is to have a fit about it and be angry. But yeah, so he then started to sink into depression, and he started drinking and taking drugs heavily. He pulled himself out of the family, really. It's like he couldn't stand to be around them. He was so jealous of how their relationship was with Leslie and that she put them first. He was incredibly jealous of that. So he would go into the garage. He would have a TV in the garage. What can I say? I have a little studio in the shed. Not weird at all. But he set up a little place in the garage, and he would go out there and watch TV and take drugs and drink while his family were in that. That was probably the best thing he could have done. Just stay away from them. The violence, obviously, at this point had begun again. He couldn't control himself, so that was then impacting on the children. So Peter, Leslie's brother, he noticed that when he went to visit them, whenever Lee was in the house, the kids were just so different. It was like, they were scared, poor thing. They were just scared all the time. Can you imagine living with someone like that? Well, I'm sure some of you probably have, and I'm sorry. So yeah, the kids were petrified of Lee. And when he would then go out, so if he'd go out, go to the pub, all that business, and not be there or be in the garage watching some crap on telly, the kids then became like, they would light up and they'd be alive again, and they'd be jumping around and having fun and playing on the furniture and talking to him and being excitable and just being like normal kids. So yeah, that was just you can see the difference in just it makes me angry. It wasn't only Peter, Leslie's brother, that noticed changes in the children. So the eldest 2 daughters, Michael and Leslie's daughters, Sarah Jane and Anne Marie, they were at a local school, and their teachers noticed that their attendance started to drop away, and also that they became closed off, really closed off. And it's around this time that it would come to light that the eldest daughter, Sarah Jane, who was 17 at the time, she was being sexually abused by her stepfather, Lee. So, just when you think it couldn't get any worse, okay, piece of shit. Also, there's a whole narrative that I don't even really want to entertain, where he says like they were in a relationship. No, you weren't. You were sexually abused. You groomed your stepdaughter. I mean, what? You groomed your stepdaughter and then you sexually abused her. Shut up. Relationship. No. Everyone that knew Sarah Jane, they knew how much that A, she loved her mother. She wouldn't do something like that to her own mum. And B, it was just obvious that this was sexual abuse. This wasn't a, what's the word that I'm looking for? What, yeah, consensual? Is that it? Yeah, like a reciprocated. It wasn't a relationship. It wasn't. Leslie even caught Lee sexually abusing Sarah Jane. She caught that happening. So she rang her brother Peter. Seems like her and Peter were really close, and she called Peter and she told him what she'd seen and what was going on. And at this point, Peter called their father, Michael, and he told them where they were. He thought that was the right thing to do because this is serious. This needs sorting out. And he went against Leslie's wishes and he told Michael where they were. Michael got the phone number for Sarah Jane's place of work. I think she worked at a McDonald's in Cornwall, where they were, where they'd moved to. And he got the phone number for that McDonald's or that place, and he rang them and spoke to Sarah Jane, or he tried to, but she wouldn't talk to him. She refused to talk to him, and that's even more of a blow, isn't it? Just awful. So, yeah, she wouldn't talk to him, but she did tell Lee. She was probably petrified of the bloke as well. She did tell Lee that he had called her work, or her mum, and it came out, and Lee found out that he'd called Sarah Jane to try and talk to her, and he was furious. This is a very controlling, very jealous man. And he had worked really, I think one of the reasons, this is just speculation, that he was like, oh yeah, I'll move to Cornwall, I'll drop everything and live here, 200 miles away from matey boy, Michael, who he wanted nothing to do with these kids or his wife. I think that might have played a part in it also. But yeah, to find out that, you've worked hard for this guy to have nothing to do with your new family, and then boom, we're back to square one. He knows where they are. He knows where Sarah Jane works. Yeah, so Ford was cross. Excuse me, I've been calling him Lee. I'll call him Lee. At the request of Lee, Leslie would ring Michael. She rang him. And she said, oh, everything's fine. Everything's okay here. Please don't worry. Blah, tried to paint a picture that everything was okay. Leslie's brother, Peter, he found out that Leslie had rung Michael and told him that everything was fine, everything's okay, I'm all right, the kids are okay, it's all made up, blah, blah, blah. And Peter was furious. Peter has been picking up the pieces of this violent, horrible, broken marriage for years. He's been getting this guy out of her house when she asks him to, and now he knows that his niece is being sexually assaulted, sexually abused by her stepdad, by this guy. He is so angry with Leslie and he begs her to leave Lee. He begs her. He's like, you now know what's going on with your own daughter. You need to leave him. You need to protect your children. And he was really, really, yeah, I think it was almost like an ultimatum, because in the summer of 2000, he would cut ties with Leslie. It was obviously just too much and he couldn't witness it anymore. So he had nothing to do with his sister. Ever the controlling mayor, Lee would contact Peter himself and he would say like, oh, this is really upsetting Leslie. She's really sad. Like, you're really upsetting your sister. Please, contact her. Please talk to her. She's your sister, blah, blah, blah. He was so controlling. He wanted it to be as if, because if Peter wasn't in contact with Leslie, there's a problem. It's like, but he wanted to play happy families. He wanted the exterior of this whole thing to be everything's okay, everything's all right. You know, it's only behind closed doors that I'm beating 10 bags of crap out of your sister, but everything's okay, you know? Douchey. So, yeah, but Peter said no. Peter said all the time that she is with you, forget it. I won't be talking to her. Now that Leslie is losing her only family support, her family network, which is her brother, and also probably a friend. You know, like it seems like he would visit them quite a lot. She would speak to him on the phone quite a lot. Well, yeah. So this triggered her to have a think, and she decided that she was going to leave Lee again. This time she sought legal advice about how to go about this. And she started the process of getting like an order in place so that Lee couldn't have contact with her and stuff like that, trying to keep her and her kids safe. And then, one night in August of 2000, Leslie confronts Lee about what has been going on between him and Sarah Jane. And sadly, Leslie and her 4 children from her first marriage are never seen again. Now, I'm not sure how this all came about and I'm not sure how long it was in between, because Peter wasn't in contact with his sister. But he realised that his sister and the 4 children were missing. He realised that, he knew. And he contacted the police to launch an investigation into their whereabouts. Lee is crafty. Lee actually rings Peter and says, "Oh, go on, where's Leslie then? Where are the kids then? I know she's come to you." And Peter's like, "No, Lee, she's not here. And I don't know where she is, and you know that. You know where they are. You tell me where they are." Lee's like, no. He thinks that they're with Peter. Bollocks. He also goes to the girls' school to take back their textbooks and things like that. And he tells the staff at the school that the kids are back in Telford. He's like, "Oh, they've moved back to Telford." So he says that that's where they are. Their mum has taken them away, and they're in Telford. This is where it gets, I don't even know if spicy is the word, unbelievable. He goes to Sarah Jane's place of work, I think it's McDonald's, and he tries to get her wages. Who are you? A lot of that in this one. Who are you? And then he's living in the bungalow that they lived in, just like nothing's happened. By the way, I will tell you what's happened in a minute. I'm aware that I haven't said. But he just lives in the bungalow with his 2 children that he shares with Leslie. That they're at the bungalow. They're living there like nothing has happened. And then and he rings an old girlfriend, an old flame, and says like, "Oh, basically like, should we get back together? Do you fancy going out on a date?" Really? He also proceeds to put CCTV cameras all around the bungalow, all around the house. Oh, why? A bit paranoid, are we? Bugger. The police only ever had one suspect, and that was Lee. They knew enough, and they only had him as a suspect. They didn't look any further. As he felt the squeeze of the police, which he's gonna, he decides to take his 2 children away. He takes them away to go and live with family or go and stay with family members. He knew what was going to happen. Lee was arrested on the 5th of October on his way back from Telford, where he'd dropped his own kids, back to Cornwall. So he was going back to Cornwall. There's a reason for that. And he was arrested. Police and forensics had got a warrant to go to the property, go to Lee's house to search it. They've got 5 people missing. Of course they're going to search their home, their property. In custody, in his interview, he didn't waste any time. He confessed to what he had done, and he told the police where their bodies were. Yeah, he had killed Leslie and her 4 children. The first 3 bodies were found in the shed in the garden, and that was Leslie and her 2 sons. And the 2 girls, Anne-Marie and Sarah Jane, they were buried in a field, so a local farmer's field. He had actually moved their bodies from the shed That is why he was coming back from Telford. He had moved the girls' bodies from the shed to this field, and then he was coming back to Cornwall to move Leslie and her sons to the same place, or to somewhere different, but not on their property. He knew that the police would search, and so he was moving the bodies. And thank God he didn't do that, because it would have been incredibly difficult to find their bodies if he had moved them to a different location. It would have taken a long time, if ever, I guess. Good job that he decided to take his kids to Telford and he hadn't finished moving the bodies. All 5 victims were killed within a 24-hour period. What Lee says happened is that, and he hasn't said a lot, but he says that he had a massive argument with Leslie. Leslie said she was going to take all of the children away from him, including his 2 children, and this just enraged him. She knew what was going on between Sarah Jane and himself. I think he, at this point, is still saying it was a relationship and that she was jealous or whatever. No. So let's say what really happened. She confronted him about him sexually abusing her daughter, and yeah, I mean, she did say that she would take all of the children away from him. You're a danger to children, clearly. Anyway, whatever happens, we don't really know because we weren't there and we only have his word for it. But they had a row. They had an argument, and he ended up using a baseball bat, and he beat Leslie very severely with the baseball bat. He then went to the garage and he found a rope. He returned to Leslie, and I think she was in a bad way. She'd been beaten quite badly, and he was just furious. He was so furious with her that she was going to do this that he used the rope and he strangled Leslie to death. He then went on to, over the course of 24 hours, strangle one by one all of Leslie's children with Michael, her first 4 children. He had researched how to do this on the internet, so he had premeditated this. So there was no way that he could say that this was a crime of passion. With Leslie, maybe, because he was so angry and he hurt her, and then, but even then he left the room. He left the room after he'd beaten her up with a baseball bat to go and find rope. So, there's lots of points along that journey where you could stop and think, no, but he didn't. But anyway, yeah, okay, crime of passion, anger, whatever you want to say, maybe with Leslie, but not with her with her 4 children. Not that. That's not a crime of passion. That's premeditated, and he looked up how to do it, and he looked up how to do it efficiently. So he barely left a mark on the children's neck. He did it with precision. Precision. That word, And he also spared his own 2 children. I forgot to put the coals on. I'm so cold that I've gone. When your fingers. Can you see? When the ends of your fingers, can you see? When they go wrinkly where you're cold. Normally that happens in the water, doesn't it? When you're cold, it happens as well. For those of you that live in only warm climates, you won't know what I'm talking about. But you basically turn into a frickin' fish when it's cold. Am I like white as a sheet? Where all of the blood has drained out of me because it's so cold, or it's all just gone to my heart. Must keep pumping. Despite confessing, right? Happens all the time, doesn't it? Despite confessing, he pleaded not guilty. Good one. His trial began in May 2021, and at the last minute, he changed his mind. And he said, oh, I'm guilty. He pleaded guilty again. He had confessed, maybe. Maybe he was trying to get a lesser sentence because it was obvious that he was going to go down. Like, what else happened, mate? Okay. So he pled guilty. I think I heard in the documentary that he said that he strangled all of the children in the kitchen. And then I just think, did he remove each child before that? On May the 24th in 2001, Lee was convicted of 5 counts of murder, and he received 5 life sentences. However, he is eligible for parole in 2025. That's not a million miles away, is it? That's frightening. Because, yeah. Although I was reading somewhere that only 75, no, not only, that 75% of people that have, that, you know, what do I mean? Let me read it. 1 in 4 people serving a life sentence are deemed suitable for release after their minimum term. So 75% remain in custody. Okay, so then assessments are carried out every 3 years after. So, you know, if they're never deemed to be safe to go into society, like every 3 years, it's just like, no, let's hope. Also, the exact dates of the murders are not known. They aren't known, unfortunately. But there's something else I'm going to read to you one moment. So the last text from Sarah Jane, it was sent at 2:37 p.m. on August the 30th. Also at the end of the month in 2000. The final incoming message was sent by a friend. Oh no, that was her last text. So her last text was sent at 2:37 p.m. on August the 30th. Well, that would suggest, teenage girl, that would suggest that August the 30th was the day. And then she got an incoming message on the 7th of September reading, "Are you still alive?" Whoa. That's just tragic, isn't it? Okay. I mean, that's not her friend's fault whatsoever, but it's just, yeah, eerie. This was just a living nightmare for the families. Leslie's brother Peter, just heartbreaking, because he begged her and he really wanted her to leave, didn't he? And he really seemed invested and close to Leslie. So this was tragedy for him, and also for Michael. So he struggled to even see his children in the last 5 years before they were murdered, and then that happened. It's just tragic. The 4 children are buried in Telford and near Michael, near their dad, so that he goes and visits them. And I think Leslie was buried in Cornwall. Lots of the community in Cornwall, where they lived in their small village, they were really, really rocked by this. The kids that they went to school with, you know, it's just sad. It's just, I think it makes me just so angry because he, like, just a jealous, angry person, and just, like, I don't know, it just feels like just stroppily, just like that, just took 5 lives, just, you know, and 4 of them, just, I can't even, yeah, really made me cross, this one. Angry Sophie. Anywho, that is all I have for you today on this case. Thank you so much for the suggestion of this one, because this was from a subscriber. Like I said, always up for suggestions in my Instagram account or in comments as well, because I do see the comments. And exciting news, I'm nearly at 500 subscribers. Oh my god, thank you so much, because this means that if we reach 500, I will get the community tab. Yes. So it means things like I can share little things and it will come up on YouTube. You know what a community tab is, I'm sure. But if you don't, yeah, so you'll see things that will come up and stuff. If we get there by Christmas, I hope so, because I want to share like a picture of me in my Christmas jumper. And if we get there by Christmas, Paul said that he will be in a photo with me. So you get to see Paul. So that's exciting. And like I said, this is not the only reason that I want the community tab, and I'm not planning on missing videos. But if, you know, like when I was sick and I had the ear thing, I could have just literally written bim, bim, bim. And everyone that is a subscriber would see that if they cared to. They'd see it pop up, I think. But it just is like more of you would have been like, oh, okay, there's no video this week, she's got a sore ear. That made that sound light-hearted. It was not sore. It was like dying on the inside, and I was really unwell. But yeah, so yeah, that's one of the reasons. Oh, now I've made myself have an itchy ear hole. Do I really look like a Christmas tree? What do I look like even? Oh god, this is going to be fun editing. I'll be like, oh, yeah, I can't care. I just can't care, you know? It is what it is. It is what it is. Paul is so lucky to have me. Oh my god. I was so angry I've hardly drank any of my gin. Drank? Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Sin and Tonic. I do hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a glass bowl of delightfulness of gin. Or a mug, whatever you like.